No, that is not the opening bell of a fight. That might be the closing bell of the battle between Clemson and Florida State versus the ACC. The fight may be over, or is it over? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode of Couz's Corner, which is brought to you by Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. We're going to talk about how a settlement may be on the horizon within the next 24 to 48 hours between Clemson and Florida State and the ACC. And they might just come out smelling like a daggone rose. But how about the rest of the teams in the ACC? That's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about the Ross Dellenger article and other articles that cover this topic. And we're going to do it right after this word from that sponsor. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident, are fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner, where we serve up nothing but top-shelf college football news and analysis around the West Virginia Mountaineers, the Big 12, and, like today, conference realignment. That's right. Today we're talking the ACC saga. Of course, that does impact the Big 12 too, so that's why we talk about it. So let's go ahead and dive in. Two articles actually have come out today. By the time I record this, I'm sure there are more, but at least two articles have come out today, one from ESPN, one from Ross Dellenger at Yahoo Sports, that Florida State and Clemson might be on the cusp of a settlement with the ACC to remain in the conference and maybe coming out smelling like a rose because they might be getting exactly what they asked for. But will this save the ACC long term? Is it a temporary fix, or are things still broken? That's what we're going to talk about. Let's go. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I do have a few quotes from it. I will go over and I will talk through this as we go, giving you my opinion along with the statements or the quotes from Ross's article. But it starts out, it says, the change to the revenue distribution structure is perhaps the most interesting piece of this settlement puzzle and could pave the way for other leagues to distribute revenue unevenly. So what Ross is talking about is it looks like the ACC is going to an uneven revenue distribution model. And they're going to go further than just the success initiative that they already implemented last year. Most of us have heard about the success initiative. The more wins you get, if you make the college football playoff, if you make the NCAA tournament, if you make a run in the NCAA tournament, you get paid more money for doing those things. That's already been implemented. But it looks like they're going to go even further with this. So let's keep going. It says, under the proposal, the conference would create a new revenue concept that awards significant dollars to programs achieving higher television ratings and viewership in football and basketball, among other factors. The revenue formula would be based on a 5-year rolling average of Nielsen ratings generated by each league school, a source said. The Media Value Initiative is expected to distribute millions to members in decreasing payments from most watched to least. Now, when I first heard about this revenue model based on TV viewership, when I read it in the ESPN article, I'm thinking, man, that's a terrible deal. If you're someone who, think about this. These are 18, we've got 16 and 18 team conferences now. So everybody doesn't play everybody, so each schedule is not equal. So if say you're a team and you get to play Miami, Florida State, Clemson all in the same season, then you got a really good TV, you're going to have really good TV numbers. But if you're somebody who plays hardly none of those teams, or maybe only plays one of them, you're not. But the fact it's over a 5-year rolling average kind of will balance that out a little bit. But there's still a challenge to me. And it's still a reason why if I'm a middle tier program, and when I say middle tier, I'm talking about from a brand value perspective. If I'm a Louisville or a Virginia Tech or a Georgia Tech or maybe even a Pitt, if you want to throw them in there, I'm not happy with this. And it all hinges on Notre Dame, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Let's keep going. It says, Though the new initiative is available to all programs, Florida State and Clemson routinely draw the most viewership among their conference peers and stand to earn eight-figure payouts. I think we all knew that. It goes on to say an additional component would reward more league revenue to schools who invest more into athletics. Another metric that would likely favor Florida State and Clemson. And again, think about this. Now, on the surface, that sounds good. Okay, you invest in sports, then you deserve to get more of that back, and that sounds good on the surface. But if you're again one of those second tier schools, or especially if you're one of the bottom tier schools, you're just going to keep getting more further and further behind in your own conference because Florida State and Clemson are going to make more money every year. That means they're going to be able to invest more money, which means they're going to get even more money. So it's not only is the rich getting richer between the P2 and the Big 12 and ACC, now you're going to see that happening inside the ACC. So somebody explain to me how the other schools in this conference are happy with that. How can you be happy knowing that you're going to get less money than your peers almost every year? I don't see how teams like Louisville, teams who can actually win, and teams who actually draw pretty decent numbers, how are you going to be, and teams who may actually have somewhere to go, the Big 12, how would you be happy with that? Let's keep going. It says a proposal comes after the conference approved last year what it describes as a success initiative. We talked about that. A system that distributes more revenue to teams that excel in football and basketball. That initiative rewards high-performing football programs as much as $25 million if all success benchmarks are met, such as qualifying for a bowl game, finishing inside the top 25, and advancing through the CFP. The initiative, as well as the new media value bonus pool, is an attempt for Commissioner Jim Phillips and league administrators to reward winning in a way that helps close the financial gap between the ACC and the two richest conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten. The difference in payout for the school that ranks first in the ACC and 18th, that's the top school and the bottom school, could be up to $20 million annually, as source projected. Think about that. You're going to be $20 million behind in your own league. And there are teams that are going to be near the bottom every year because they don't have the TV viewership numbers to compete. To me, this right here could end up driving some of the lower level members, lower tier as far as brand value members of the ACC. They might end up getting driven out completely and not even being able to keep up. They might have to go down to a G5 conference at some point. Now, maybe it won't come to that for some of them, but it could for some. The rich are going to get richer even at the conference level. Now, how long will it be before they start implementing this in other conferences? That's what worries me a little bit as a fan of a Big 12 team. Let's keep going. The settlement with the ACC is expected to provide a defined penalty fee to Florida State, Clemson, and all other members that wish to, at some point, exit the conference and break the grant of rights. Now, what they're talking about here is right now the way the system is set up, the bylaws are written in the ACC. If you leave the conference before 2036, because that's how long the grant of rights lasts. Actually, I don't even know if it goes through 2036. If you leave the conference, you have to pay approximately $120 million exit fee, which is equivalent to 2 years of revenue, basically. But on top of that, you also have to forfeit the remaining TV revenue you would be owed from the conference through the remainder of the grant of rights, which is 2036. So if you leave the league in 25, you don't get any of your TV money for the next 11 years, basically. That's the way it's set up. But according to this article by Ross, this settlement agreement may feature an agreement where they're going to have basically one flat fee, where if you leave, you pay X amount, period. There's not going to be a grant of right. There's not going to be a withholding of your TV revenue plus the exit fee. It's all going to be lumped in together as one fee. At least that's the way I read this. And every year, here's the attractive part to schools like Clemson, Florida State, and others who might be looking to get out of the league at some point and who might eventually have a home in a P2. Every year, that number is going to decrease. And according to the article at ESPN, by the time they get to the 2030 season, it will be less than $100 million to leave the ACC. That is a check that schools like Florida State could probably afford to write. especially if they're making an additional $20 million a year more than their peers, and especially if they go out and get a private capital or private equity deal in addition to that. So I expect in 2030, 2031 timeframe, somewhere around in there is when we might see the ACC actually implode. I don't think it'll happen before then now, because I think these schools, since ESPN elected to extend the TV deal through 2036, and since these schools are locked into the league through 2036 through the grant of rights, I don't see them leaving or being able to afford to leave before that point. And I also don't see the Big Ten and SEC wanting to add anybody before that, because let's face it, you've got the House settlement coming up. They've got to see how that's going to work. And it looks like, unless you're going to bring those leagues $100 million, it's not really worth it for them to add you. And right now, I'm not sure there are any schools that do that outside of maybe North Carolina, because that seems to be the school that's being talked about the most as being the most attractive for those conferences, because it's a brand new market in a fast-growing state that would be attractive to advertisers. But right now, North Carolina couldn't afford to get out of the ACC because they wouldn't be able to afford to leave 11 years early and pay that gargantuan exit fee. Let's keep going. It says also part of any long-term agreement, the league's biggest brands, Florida State, Miami, and Clemson, are expected to play more football games regularly with Notre Dame. The Irish are expected to play at the very least 2 of the 3 each season in a rotation. Those games are almost certain to be among the most watched ACC contests each year. So now to the Notre Dame thing I want to talk about. So Notre Dame's going to get to play, or let's just flip it around. Florida State, Miami, and Clemson will get to play Notre Dame more than any of the other teams in the ACC. So if I'm the other schools in the ACC, I'm asking the league, as part of this settlement agreement, don't include the Notre Dame games in this in the calculations when we're factoring in TV viewership, because their numbers are automatically going to be higher than ours over a 5-year period, because they're playing Notre Dame more frequently than everybody else, which makes them get even more money. So they would be at the top every year anyway, most likely. And if you throw in the Notre Dame game, nobody's even going to have a chance to catch them, with the exception of maybe one season. But again, it's factored in over 5 years. So I'm trying to get non-conference games, and I'm trying to get games against Notre Dame out of the equation when factoring in the TV viewership numbers, or else it's going to be unbalanced. When you have unbalanced scheduling, there's no way for these schedules to be equal. And you've got the rivalry games. You've got Georgia Tech versus Georgia every year. That's not fair to the rest of the ACC teams. You have Florida versus Florida State every year. How's that fair to the rest of the ACC teams? Nobody else has those marquee non-conference games on their schedules to take advantage of. That's why this model, to me, is not going to work long term. Florida State, Clemson, and Miami are just going to get richer and richer and richer, and they're going to be really close, potentially real close to the SEC and Big Ten most years. Yet you're going to have all the other schools about $20 million behind them. I just don't understand how that's going to make any sense. How is that a sustainable model long term? And folks, I'm telling you, I'm hearing from a source who's dialed into what's going on with this situation. This is not going to solve any of the ACC's problems. There's still going to be a lot of finger pointing. There's still going to be a lot of dissension within the ACC, especially among those teams in tier 2, like Louisville, for example. Louisville played for an ACC title just 2 years ago. Pitt has won an ACC title 3 years ago. And they're going to get screwed with this model. Yes, they'll still be in a Power 4 conference. Yes, they'll still be at least equal to the Big 12, but they're going to start falling further and further behind their own conference peers. For the next 5 years, they're going to be way behind the 8 ball, with no way out, at least until 2030, 2031, it appears, unless there's some major windfall of cash that comes their way through private equity or something else. Outside of that, they would only agree to this because they have no other options, in my opinion. And that is not a good place to be for these schools who are solid brands, who bring in pretty decent ratings, and who play good football most years. And they're going to get kicked right in the nuts, basically, with this deal. Because they're not going to play Notre Dame as frequently. They're not going to be able to invest as much in sports because they're not going to make as much. They're getting kicked while they're down to a degree here, in my opinion, especially the teams on the bottom of the conference. But again, they're probably going to go along with this because they know they have nowhere to go. Teams like Wake Forest, maybe a Boston College, they don't have anywhere to go. And I'm not trying to disrespect those programs, but when they start talking about brand value, those schools are going to be near the bottom of the league, just like SMU may be too. Cal. Those are 4 schools right off the top of my head that might be stuck near the bottom almost every single year. Now, SMU maybe not because they're actually winning, so they might be able to take advantage of this success initiative. But the rest of those schools aren't winning a whole lot these days. They better start. UVA's another one. What are they going to do? Let's keep going. It says, Clemson and Florida State's willingness to remain in the conference is, for some, a shocking revelation and an about-face from their previous actions. School officials have felt that if they are legally unhinged from the ACC's grant of rights, there will be takers. But it is unlikely that any SEC or Big Ten school will agree to accept reduction in their TV distribution to add any school. I talked about that already. I'll wrap it up I'm going to wrap up Ross's article part by saying the settlement is seen as a solution, perhaps, maybe, temporarily. I think that's the key phrase. Perhaps, maybe, temporarily, to avoid any court decision over the validity of the grant of rights. Just last week, the Florida Supreme Court declined to take up a request from the ACC to delay a lawsuit by FSU scheduled to be heard this spring in Tallahassee. A potential loss in court that immediately opens the grant of rights could have a catastrophic impact, not only on the ACC, but other conferences, setting a precedent for all schools to break what were at first thought to be binding agreements. So that Big 12 and other conferences who have grant of rights agreements, they're probably glad this is going to happen, that this isn't going to go to court and that they can't find a way out of the grant of rights, because then it opens the door for other schools and other conferences to do the same. All they would have to do is go to court. Boom, they're out of their league, potentially. So from that regard, it's a good thing. However, from a conference expansion regard, if you're Brett Yormark and you were hoping to land a Louisville or a Georgia Tech or someone out of the ACC, now you're going to probably have to wait at least another 4 to 5 years until these schools can afford to get out of the ACC. That's what it appears right now. It looks like this may hold the conference together with duct tape and zip ties, at least for the next 5 years. But make no bones about it, I do not believe this is a long-term fix for the ACC. I only think it's temporary. Because I just don't see how the rest of the schools in this league, especially those in the second tier, are going to be okay with this long-term. Because it's going to continue to put them at a major disadvantage each and every year. At least most years. But I want to know what you think about this. Do you think we'll see conference realignment before 2031 at the P4 level? Now, what I mean by that is I don't think we'll see a team go from one P4 conference to another P4 conference. I do think we might see, the Pac is going to continue to do their thing, the Mountain West. We might even see the Big 12 add a UConn or something like that. May even see the ACC add UConn or whatever. But as far as P4 to P4 movement, I don't think we'll see any of that until at least 2030, 2031 timeframe, when all these TV deals like the Big 10, the Big 12, the college football playoff, when all those TV deals are up for renewal, that's when we'll see teams maybe start to jump ship. You might see North Carolina go to the Big 10 or SEC then. You might even see Florida State and Clemson make a move like that. You may see Miami make a move like that. Maybe you see UVA go to the Big 10. Maybe you see Louisville, Syracuse, other schools maybe go to the Big 12, whatever the case may be. Point being, this may slow conference realignment down at P4 level for the time being. But I think this is the ACC being held together by zip ties and duct tape. Just waiting for that to break. But what do you think? I want to know your thoughts in the comment section. Also, there's ways you can support my channel here by becoming a VIP channel member. And I'm going to give random shout outs to my VIP channel members of this episode. And they are Browns and Beers, Crispy OO, Big Dan T, Jonathan Bayless Outdoors, and WVU Earl. Thank you all for your contributions to the channel. If you want to be a channel member, there are 2 levels, the club level member and the pub level. They're $4.99 and $2.99 a month. You get some perks to go along with, including those shout outs. And it's also a very easy and inexpensive way to support what I do here on the channel. If you can't afford to do that or don't want to do that, all you have to do, hit the thumbs up button below. It really helps out algorithm. Subscribe to the channel, help me get to my next big goal of 10,000. You can also share it with family and friends who like West Virginia football, Big 12 football, or conference realignment talk, because that's what I do here on the channel. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. YouTube thinks you'll like this episode right here in the corner, so you may want to check it out. There's also a channel or a show in the left corner, or in this corner. Yeah, I guess it'd be your left corner or right corner. I don't know what side it is. Anyway, it's from my Hoops from the Hills basketball channel where I cover West Virginia basketball. You might want to check that out as well. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. Hope the rest of your day is top shelf. Stay blessed and cue country roads.